Welcome once again, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the Chronicles of Arcanis, where we take this opportunity to talk about my favorite setting. The Chronicles of Arcanis is a deep exploration into Arcanis, the world of shattered empires, that we talk about the setting itself, but most importantly, what we talk about is the camaraderie that is created through the ability to share really what is one of the best written settings. And it's not that it's written in that, oh, it's edited perfectly, because that's the running joke among Arcaniacs, is that, we just wish they were a little better at editing. But, that's not what draws us in. What draws us in is the story initially, as we've been discussing with previous interviews, that that's what grabs you, that you start reading things and you go, wait, man, this isn't Gary Gygax's D&D anymore. This is something different. There's more going on here. And I've pointed out all these ongoing tropes and what I see now as almost fundamental desires of the player base in fifth edition that were already being offered in third edition in the Living Arcanist campaign. And by that, I mean, of course, introduction of the Darkkin, who are an analogy of the tieflings that we see today, the Val families, these um, divinely, celestially inspired humanoids. Are they human, but they live there? And now we have Asimir in D&D 5th edition as a player race. So, it's constantly, we can look back at just kind of the mechanic stuff, right? And then comes the story. And the reason I think that Arcanus became the setting for folks who had moved well past murder hobo mindset in D&D is that it felt like you were exploring the unknown. Like, I you have to give, you have to give the the benefit to Greyhawk and Blackmore and all of those early designers. But when you're first designing things, especially when you're the beginning, it's going to be the simplest design that you can make a proof of concept and get out for sale. And over the years, I think people began to want the depth of story that they were getting in the fantasy books they were reading, Fafford and Gray Mouser and Conan and the Michael Moorcock Eternal Champion series. And it was in Arcanus I began to feel that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing not just an opportunity to be Conan the Barbarian and kill everything in front of me. I see an opportunity to be an epic hero and make changes and influence what happens. And then the best part of it all happened, which was I became part of the Living Arcanist community. And honestly, it's the community, right? I mean, you listen to each of the previous episodes, and you can hear the emotional commitment to the adventures, to the characters, to the setting, and the commitment to allow the story to unfold despite however it may affect your own wishes, because you've been given the opportunity to influence it. So immediately there was just this growth of local gamers and conventions and just small areas of people saying, this is what I want to do. And now at the time I was living in Lexington, Kentucky. I just moved up from Miami, where I knew all the Paradigm people. And I got to meet the various factions of gamers. There's a real strong contingency, of course, in Ohio. But Indiana, it turns out there was a northern and a southern faction. The southern faction were the Evansville folk. And then I met a bunch of people up in Fort Wayne. And that's where I met my guest today, Lucas Amodio. Lucas was running small game days, and there's a regular small convention in Fort Wayne. And that's where I discovered this guy is organized and he's committed. And it's been an inspiration to see his involvement in Living Arcanis from the very beginning. So, without, as they say, further ado, here's my friend Lucas. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Lucas, how you got into gaming in general, where you're from, and where your gaming roots are?
Well, thanks, Ed. I'm originally from Evansville, Indiana. And so I started gaming there with a couple friends during high school, but lightly. And then when I went off to college is actually when I was first truly introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. And we played a lot, and it was weird and unusual because it's a bunch of college people goofing off together. And played a lot of different games. And then I really got into Dungeons and Dragons in the late 90s with the Living City campaign that they had for
Okay.
a while there. And so I was there for the tail end of second edition, and then when they went to three, when they went to three,
Mm-hmm.
had a great deal of fun with it. But then that campaign started wrapping up, and so there was a convention. It's still going on in Fort Wayne called Winter Fantasy. Happens
Mm-hmm.
every year in February, and that was where they showcased the RPGA games. And I think that year, as they were wrapping up, and I could be off on my years, as they were wrapping up, they were also starting up Living Force as one of the
Mm-hmm.
games. So we were playing that. And then one of my friends, Bo Powell, got dragged into an Arcanis game there by Henry, saying, "Hey, you want to try this?" And Bo started it, loved it, said, "We got to start playing this." And if I remember right, he had a Twilight Warrior that he was absolutely loving.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started playing with him, and he started organizing game days. And then me and some of my other friends started taking that over. And so that went on for quite a few years. I actually ran into an old friend of mine who still had a certificate I'd signed when I was running the day from 2003. When
Oh,
I ran a game weekend at my house. We would
uh-huh.
play Ketchup Con
Sure,
right
sure, sure.
before Origins so that people
Right.
could catch up on some of the mods. At one point, we had Jeff Wittenhauer drove up to our house with Jackie, and they ran game day. They ran a gaming weekend for us.
Mm-hmm.
We occasionally do it over the. I think one time we did a New Year's Eve con because
So for
much more
people who
enjoyable.
aren't familiar with RPGA, the living stuff in particular, we've talked about it in previous episodes, but we didn't talk about certs. And so what happens is all of a sudden you discover there's a whole species of gamer called a cert whore. What? I mean, at the end of every adventure, there would be blank certs just so the cert whores could collect them because you got to have them all, right? Explain the
Well,
cert. Explain what these certifications. They're slips of paper. I had
yeah.
to have a special cert cutter paper slicer just so that I could be an efficient game master.
Yeah, so certs were about a third the size of a page, so you get three or more to a page, depending on how they were printed up. And say in the middle of the game, you found a +1 flaming sword. Well, how do you represent who gets that sword at the end of the game? Because only one person can get it, depending on, and different game systems came up with different ways of doing this. But the way Arcanis was doing it was you get the +1 flaming sword at the end of the game, people would decide who it was best for. And usually there was enough certs to go around everyone. Now, we did have cert hoarders where people who wanted everything for generally no good reason. And many times what we did was set up a rule that if you got, if everybody didn't get a cert, then you had to kick money in
Hmm.
the pot to pay off for that. And
Mm-hmm.
certs were actually one of the places where you were mentioning the typos. Certs were some of the funniest typos. We had a +1 Skulking Scimitar. At one point in time, we had a potion that weighed 12,000 pounds because it was typoed on there. And, heck, I kept that cert, not because I ever wanted to use the potion, but because it was funny to have.
Right.
And
Memorabilia.
RPG,
This
yeah.
is part of what we're talking about tonight. That this is a tour of nostalgia, right? And I'm usually a pretty anti-nostalgia person, to be honest. It I I rarely see a reason for it, but this coming out of my life experience, coming out of COVID, being in a similar situation as to where you are, though under much better circumstances. I didn't move to New York City at the beginning of the COVID, and then find myself trying to figure out how to integrate into the largest city, in on the East Coast. Um, I had plenty of opportunity as working in the hospitality industry. Immediately I'm with people, I'm in there, and even working in the hospital while I was still working, I was around people all the time. Now what I discovered is I didn't, because I decided in 2010 to step away from gaming to focus on my career, because I'm a late career starter.
Same here.
That Yeah, that I really didn't understand. I thought that the way gaming was such a large part of my life that it was an impediment to my success. And what I've discovered is that no. it it's like all things. It's a tool. I can use it properly or improperly. It's like anything that I use in my life that makes me healthier. I can eat, you know, a bowl of porridge and fresh fruit, or I can have French toast with butter and syrup. One I can have every day, and one I can't. And so my dearest friend who introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons, his name is Aaron Senzori, and somehow growing up, he understood it was all things in moderation, and that's not me. So what what I needed, what I need, I need this community. I need this camaraderie. I need to know that those inside jokes from typos on a piece of paper that we hold on to for now, what, 2 decades? Well, there's a reason, right? And that's what I keep coming back to, is this emotional connection, this personal connection, the interpersonal bonds that were created through this one campaign. Now, I was never into any of the other living campaigns, so I don't know what they're like, but I've never heard of any other widespread, truly international gaming community as tight, as supportive, and as invested as the Arcaniacs across the world.
I'm still friends with a lot of people that I used to play with. And I mean, I don't get to see them anymore at conventions because people grew up, people had families, people changed jobs, people changed what they like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of us still keep track of each other on Facebook, saying hi, checking in, making sure people are okay. And
That's how I knew you moved to Westchester, was just,
yeah,
oh, look, making this big move to New York City. Well, hey man, when you get a chance, here's some advice, here's some spots.
exactly. And so it's been pretty good. I've enjoyed reconnecting with people at some of the conventions too.
Where have
Uh,
you been?
I mainly go to Origins, but I did do Gen Con one year. I
Okay.
actually, that year I actually volunteered to help run Arcanis at Gen Con and saw a lot of people and had a good time introducing other people to Arcanis.
That's my favorite part. So I'm headed that's part of my reintroduction into gaming, and moving towards, I want to this professional DMing thing, when we were first playing Arcanus 20 years ago, this is what we dreamed of, was an
Mhm.
opportunity to be able to, make a living. And so many of us thought that publishing was the way, and of course we realized no, that we saw that initial glut in 3.5, 3.0, 3.5, that it's actually better for the community that a great publisher gets a setting out that attracts those quality players who buy in and then want to drive those creative efforts towards Arcanis. Because that's everybody I've interviewed so far. I mean, that's exactly what happened. It's just like you, just like me. We got this quick introduction. We went, whoa, this is different. I want more. And I want more. I want more to the point, because, of course, in the very beginning, there wasn't more, right? There was so little. And we were hungry and desperate for it that people were, all right, I'll do more. We need more. Everybody was desperate to get more bodies in, because we knew that you need to build the community to draw in the creative minds to bring out more products so that we could all enjoy. And that's really what happened right away.
Yeah.
Did you do any adventure writing when you were?
I wrote 8 Arcanis mods. I was part of the Invisible Kings.
Okay, we've been talking about those. Which Invisible King area?
Paldaris. So right here up above my shoulder in
Okay.
Valantica is Paldaris. And so what happened was we were originally going to go after Panari, which the bread basket,
I thought it was Panari.
who
I'm
knows?
joking. I'm joking.
That must
There's
be a
no...
Milandesian pronunciation.
Okay.
So anyway, but we knew that another group was going after. We really wanted to get it. So we found Paldaris. And rather than having to write up, based on what was already out there, there was only like 2 paragraphs of material on Paldaris.
Yeah.
We came up with our own setting. And what I heard Henry say when he got our proposal for that is, where the heck is Paldaris? And so we
what was
wrote.
your proposal? Tell us about it.
We proposed a city where you had the little bit of conflict between the gender identities, because Balantica is more of a matriarchal society.
The
But you had,
Valdelinov family.
yeah, but you had we had a male senator who was the son of somebody who'd been the senator before. So you got the family connections. And we wrote 4 regular modules, and we tried to base things on pieces out of Roman literature and pieces like that.
Okay.
So we had different themes based on that. So we did 4 modules in a story arc, which concluded in an election module. And the fun thing about the election module was there was no combat. It was your team running around trying to do things to either support or hinder different candidates. And creativity was open. So, it wasn't a murder hobo mod. It was a, what can you think of? And the first time I ran it, somebody came up with something that wasn't even on my list. And I had to write it in for the next time for the edits. So that was great. And then we did 2 soft points, death and taxes. We had a lot of fun coming up with single title names for those.
Yeah.
And then when Crusade came about, I wrote 2 modules, cash and espionage. And espionage is currently available in the 5e campaign. It's one of the intro mods.
Oh, cool. Good.
And I got to take a town in Canseri that'd been destroyed and rebuild it. And come up, just based on what they had in the Canseri book, go, what would have happened X decades later?
Mm-hmm.
And so I integrated
What city was that?
And that sort of thing, and had a wonderful time building that up.
And what city was that in Kanseri?
I just blanked on the name. I'm sorry, I should have looked it up before the call, but it's been a few years since I wrote that. I actually wrote that when I was in law school, as a exercise to refresh my brain.
Right. Free your mind after you've been shoving all that law stuff into it.
Pretty much. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed writing. Turns out writing modules made me a better attorney.
How so?
Well, I have to anticipate what the players are going to do. I have to,
Mhm.
as the writer, I have to anticipate what they're going to do. So I like to give multiple paths. In one of the scenes, for those who don't know, Canceri is where all evils come from. And so there's a lot of undead. Well, in one scene, you run into a skeleton who asks for your help. Well, some players are going to attack straight out. Some players are going to be nice and actually talk to the skeleton. And what do you do? What do you choose to do? That was always what kept me in Arcanis was the moral quandaries. When I have a question, I think one of the great ones at the beginning that I ran into early in the campaign was you had a gentleman who had he was a Melendesian gentleman, he turned undead and he was hiding it from everybody, and he was performing what we'll call miracles. And they wanted to know whether or not he should be introduced into the pantheon as a saint.
Uh-oh.
And so we decided it was better for them to have a saint to inspire them than it was for them to knock down a hero. And so we went with that. And there's been a lot of moral quandaries that I've enjoyed where you've got to debate in character, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to proceed? And it's not just kill everything and take the treasure.
So I just played Espionage 2 weeks ago, or well,
Mm-hmm.
2 Sundays ago, and it was very much what I would consider a classic Arcanist adventure. In that there are all these opportunities to behave in a classic Dungeons and Dragons way, as if you were in Greyhawk or the Forgotten Realms. But the odds are that's not the most optimum thing to do. And so when I write adventures, and this is I got this really through thinking, how Arcanus puts together, because they're not all this way, but enough of them are, in that you don't always have to have combat. There are
Mm-hmm.
times where it is more important to have a conversation, a debate, a give a lecture, an inspirational speech. There are times when it's more important to have gained influence than that +1 flaming longsword.
Yes, exactly.
And so I really loved the fact that, yep, it's still here. This is exactly, you know, it was really interesting because I don't think anybody else had, even though there were other experienced players I thought playing, it was like they didn't know much about Canceri itself for some reason, other than the trope that everything evil comes from Canceri. And it took a fair amount of conversation on my part, or at least, a pretty strong nudge of, hey, maybe if we go talk to this person, they'll help us out. Because if what we want to happen happens, it's going to screw over somebody that they don't like. And the truth is, at these levels of politics, that's what they do to each other. They
Uh-huh.
make each other look bad.
That was the entire point of the mod, was to screw that over. And you know, I mean, there's always been the politics going on in Arcanis.
Hmm.
And just being able to get a favor from a major player or that sort of thing. Yeah, it makes it fun.
Yeah, I
And
think the collection of boons and favors is way better than loot, and way
mhm.
more influential in from game to game.
Well, I'm currently 10th level in the 5e Arcanis campaign.
All right. Well, normally
I've
I
got,
ask people to tell me about their original character, but because I'm getting into the fifth edition, tell me about your fifth edition character.
well, I was just going to say, I've got almost all the loot that I need for that character. I've had a great time playing with that, and I've managed to figure out a good way to play the character, and I enjoy him. But, I'm not going to argue about trying to get a +1 sword that somebody, that pops up anymore or any of that stuff. The other fun thing is I've seen people turn down certificates because it's branded with the wrong deity or the wrong group.
Wow. Really?
I, hey, I'm a Hurionite. I follow the deity of lightning, and that's a Nearite sword, the deity of fire. I don't want that, and they will
Which is
turn
so
down.
interesting, right? Because prior to Arcanus, everything revolved around what? Alignment.
Hmm.
But in fact, in Arcanus, everything revolves around religion.
Yeah, and even then, okay, hey, this is something from the god of death, Naroth. I don't want that, and there's so much of the religion they played into this sort of stuff. I mean, I see players still hating on playing Alluri, or the Arcanist version of elves, still hating on the humans because the human deities ate their deities.
Yep, as
And
should be done. That makes sense to me.
and they won't touch any of the magic items related to the human deities because that's heresy. No way I'm going to do that. Lots of pieces like that. So that's always been fun from the looting point of view. Hey, is this actually appropriate to my character?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Real
then
role playing. Imagine that.
go figure. So I'm playing in 5e. I am playing a Sarishan, which is their version of Lizard Man. Uh, and I'm playing what's called the Shaman, which is
Which
a
clutch?
huh?
Which clutch of
Oh,
the
he's
Theresin?
he's Black Talon.
Okay.
At the time I started playing 5e, that was the only thing available. And
Okay.
to be honest, I've enjoyed it because I've got reasons for why he's traveling and exploring and all that stuff, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I had a good time trying to come up with a background. Well, we had two crusades. Well, let me play somebody who had been in one of the previous crusades, lost all the other members of his hatching group,
All
and
right,
is
hold on. I just realized I missed a jargon alert. Saressin. I mean, I've
yeah.
mentioned them a little bit in the past, but in fact, you're the first player character, Saressin. So why don't you tell us, for those of us that haven't played Arcanus yet, this is another example of Arcanus saying, hey, here is an opportunity to play a non-human character that isn't a dwarf, an elf, a halfling, or a gnome, and gave them that Arcanus twist. So tell us about Saressin and their Arcanus twist.
So Sarestan actually originally come from over here, uh, the morass, and the Sarestan were part of the Sethagorian Empire. Pretty much think lizard empire. So you had the Nagas that we've heard of. You've got Sanu, which is more like snake men, and multiple different varieties. Well, Saracen are a variation on lizardmen, and there's a whole bunch of different clutches of lizardmen that were bred and grown by the Sethagorian Empire to be their soldiers. Well, they're bred so much that they hate every other clutch. So much so that if they smell the pheromones of one clutch, they'll go into a mindless rage and attack them, which has always been interesting. The three
How
clutch
often has that come into play?
in my game, I've had to make in the games I've played, I've had to make the saving throw a few times.
Wow, cool. Very cool. Well,
Uh,
because
and
that's the kind of thing is all right. So here's this aspect, but does it actually come into play in the setting, right? And that's
mhm,
awesome that it does. It
yeah,
actually
yeah,
becomes part of how you interact with an adventure.
right. Well, I think, and so this particular clutch decided, and it's a matriarchal society. Men, the males pretty much have very little power. They're the fighters, or the shaman if they want to. If you want to be a cleric or a magic user, you have to be. It's a female, and it's based on how close to the fire and how much heat the egg gets while before they hatch. So it's kind of, it's a fun little aspect that way. And so,
Just as a quick interruption again, so people should know that there is uh, an entire book, setting book on this
mhm.
that both was written for 3.5 and updated for 5th edition, and it was written by a herpetologist. The man, the writer was, somebody who studied lizards and snakes professionally. So some of the interesting variations are actually stuff that he pulled from real world examples. And so everything has like it's one of my favorite words, verisimilitude. There is a verisimilitude to Arcanis that comes through in ways that, to me, that's actually like the foundation of the Arcanist twist, right? Let's get to this verisimilitude and then twist it in a way that fucks people.
So this particular clutch ran away, and they left the Sethagron Empire and went up to Melander, which is actually just above my head, which is kind of an area of more Germanic influence, knights, that sort of thing, compared to Corion, which feels more Roman to me. And up there, they found a geothermal swamp where they could actually be warm enough to have their own culture and have their clutches, their eggs be born and that sort of thing. Well, the Melandesians found them, and rather than trying to wipe them out, they made a deal with them. They could have the swamp that the Melandesians didn't want, and they served as soldiers. And actually, the warlord, the head male Saracen, who I got to play in one of the LARPs, is actually the second was the backup or the head bodyguard. I forget the official title he had for the King of Melander, and he served in that role for over 40 years. It was at a Battle Interactive where we got to decide who was going to take over that particular role, and due to political maneuvering, we got the head male Saracen to take it on, and that was a lot of fun. And so I play my Saracen character, because I enjoyed being that character at that LARP, and I figured might as well go for it.
I just interviewed the young King Osric the other day. So Matt's
Yes.
was, I think, I don't know, like one or two interviews before you. I have a whole bunch in the can right now. But
And
yeah, that's one of those LARPs. Those were the kinds of things, right? So I mean, amazing opportunity for role playing and that. So yeah,
politicking.
politicking, man. That was the LARPs. We discussed this, how, so at that LARP, I was playing this, my NPC was a gnome who was, uh, he had a huge troop, right, of gnomes, and he was just looking for a safe place
Oh, I
to,
remember that.
yeah. And he was, it turned out, the wealthiest character in the room, and had the secrets for some of the assassination plot. No, but I had three, maybe four players, and nobody, because they said, "Oh, well, I'm here from," nobody would listen. I knew about the assassination plot.
And they role played that perfectly by not listening to the gnome. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I remember we had these little coins for influence,
Mm-hmm.
and at one point they were trying to figure out who was going to be Osric's bride,
Right,
and
right.
so everybody's putting in for who they wanted, and then Osric counted up how many votes there were and put enough influence in to not have to get married.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I gave him some of that influence so he could do that.
well, and then I was the last one on deciding I think it was King's Champion. Was
There
the
you go.
title. And
Yeah.
I had a stack of 30 left over. I had no idea. Well, nobody bothered to save any, so that's how I got it to work,
That's awesome. And that's how it should work, right? Everybody's expended all of their favors, all of their, you know, all their influence, every boon is being taken in, and there's still this one person left who's able to step up and say, okay, but this is what I'm going to do.
And that was a hoot. I mean, the first the first LARP we went as the Calcestus hit squad because we were angry at the Emperor Calcestus for doing this, and this was Convocation of the
Convocation
Divine.
of the Divine. Yep, that was the first one.
And Henry came up, and I mean, we had little buttons with the Coriani eagle and crosshairs on it.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry came up and said, "You're not going to be able to kill the Emperor. It's too safe here." What happens? At the very end, everybody made a toast, and the Emperor drank from a poisoned cup and died. And man, the whole room just lost it. It was, so it was always fun whenever we got a LARP to really be able to mess with things and figure
Mm-hmm.
out, hey, how do we want to do this? What manipulation can we come up with? And I mean, the people playing the NPCs were usually very devious and sometimes came up with things completely off script.
Yeah, that was another. So I'm talking to Sean Esterling a while
Mhm.
back, and he played an NPC that was it Sean? Yeah, and he was a Sarishan NPC. And people
Mhm.
would come up to him and ask him stuff, and he would say, well, I'll talk to you if you sign this contract, right? Now, it was nothing. There was no in-game mechanic. There was nothing. And eventually Henry came up to him and says, Sean, you can't do that. There's no, he goes, I'm not doing anything. I'm just asking them to do this. It's up to them. They're the ones that's inferring that there's something more to this than there is. All he was saying is that you won't use this information I give you against me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Uh,
same thing, right? Here he just threw in a little wrinkle that was appropriate and made it more enjoyable. I feel that when that type of story stuff comes out, it's just more enjoyable for everybody, whether they realize it in the moment or not.
yeah. So I remember one time I was playing my PC and I really didn't care about what was going on in the LARP. So I set up all my leftover certs and put together a marketplace
I
in
was
the
just going to
LARP.
ask you about the aftermarket, if there was still a aftermarket for certs, if there was a
Um,
lot of trading and horse dealing
not
going on.
not so much, not like I used to do it. So you asked about my original character. My original character was Lord Aneshe of Altheria. No, they don't have, and he was a Darkin. No, they don't have any lords in Altheria. He was a merchant, and I did a lot of wheeling and dealing. My goal was to get to 1,000,000 gold because Pedro promised me that I could buy an airship for 1,000,000 gold. I never made it. I because of real life, I never really moved that far and I moved that far along, but I still, I had a great time. I would set up, they'd have their regular marketplace where they're selling official certs, and I'd be selling the certs that they had, that leftover certs I had, you know, because you could sell a cert to an NPC for 50%, or I might buy it for a little bit more and then sell it for a little bit more, make a
Mm-hmm.
little markup on it. And I had cert, I can't tell you how many times I owned the +1 returning dagger for some reason. Because people kept on selling it because it was so expensive an item and they just couldn't really use it.
It's a way to pick up some quick cash.
Hey, that was the fun hustle of playing the character. I was doing that. We did a lot of crazy things in some of those games.
Yeah.
Uh, and there were a lot of crazy opportunities that came up depending on what your DM and what your other players wanted to do.
And I think that's another example of um, playing in organized play where the organization isn't focused on profits, it's focused on play.
Hmm.
And, I mean, absolutely, Paradigm Concepts is a business. They need to pay for their expenses. They need to make sure that they don't go in the hole with these big battle interactives and LARPs. But man, the fact that they're willing to put in the time and energy to make it happen for no other reason to give us a great time. You
Yeah.
know, I've talked about the Arcanus effect at Origins multiple times, how during the battle interactives, the rest of the RPGA just didn't run any slots because there was nobody available to play. Sometimes there weren't even judges available to run. So what was the last convention you've been to for Arcanus?
Uh, well, I did play one module at and ran one module actually at last Origins, but the last major Arcanus convention was Arcanus Con, which was going to be April of 2020.
Right.
And so it got pushed off roughly a year, and we did it online.
Okay.
And that was fun. We actually ran into some old NPCs from the first campaign.
Really? Who
No
was
spoil.
that?
I'm not giving any spoilers or
Okay.
any of
Okay.
that. I've been very careful about trying to not
Yeah,
spoil
yeah.
anything.
I'm
Anyone,
always not so concerned about spoilers. I have a pretty
well, for the
good
5e, I don't want to spoil. The old
yeah, I hear you.
campaign, hey, we can talk about all that, but
Yeah, yeah. That's I've said the first story arc, the Korean Civil War is now a spoiler zone. We're just gonna talk about what's what. We've already talked about all of the big surprises between Skiz and the Gladius Elites, and how well those things were planted into the player base like in the very beginning, and lo and behold they're like the two most important things you can have in the end.
mhm. I remember we went to an extra plane to get the Gladius of Light. And and the story actually came back to that plane one time where we found out it had been completely overrun and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was also the screw around and find out opportunity. Where you open the door and there's this massive horde out there. You could go out and try to fight them, but the GM's just supposed to just describe you dying.
Right.
And it's very much you're not ready for this, but we'll let you do it anyway.
Right. Well, which brings us back to one of my favorite slogans from Arcanus is stupidity leads to character creation.
I still
The
have that
last
t-shirt
Gen
somewhere.
Con in Milwaukee, I'm sitting up in the stands mustering up with all the other game masters, and all the players are starting to go out to their table. They're all coming together so they can get to their tables, and I get all of the game masters together and we just start chanting, stupidity leads to character creation. Stupidity leads to character creation. And this was the event where it was the 2 round assault on the Gate of Tears.
Okay, that's before my time, but yes, I remember that.
Well, that was like, the
The biggest.
end of the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there you are on the Sorcerer King's island of Yamandragor, and that was interesting. That's where, so talk about these great, amazing groups that we meet. That's where I met the Georgia contingent,
Mm.
Weaver and those guys, Daryl Weaver and that contingent. And
Mm-hmm.
and I've mentioned it was hilarious watching them or running them because they had played together so much that they were like doing special ops hand signals to each other as they were doing their very, and each, I laughed. I was like, yeah, man, actually, that's the only way you're going to get through this is if you don't talk.
At one point in time, we had a group of Coriani Legionnaires. It was like 6 players all built a crew of little
Mm-hmm.
Coriani Legionnaires. And at one point in time, we had 6-second rounds going because everybody rolled their dice, say their damage, and we moved forward. And it was shield wall all the way through, just marching forward.
Jump, jump.
Chomp, chomp.
Awesome.
And it was a hoot. There was another battle interactive we went to during the Coriani Civil War. We played our Cancerese characters. We were
Yep.
ticked off that the Coriani had came and messed up with the Canseri Civil War.
I was in that battle interactive.
Yeah, and so we turned around and went to the Impebin Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going around coup de grace, Nearites, and then we ran into a round that was all incorporeal undead.
Right. That was,
And,
yep.
and we did eight waves of it because we had a cleric of the god of death who was just dismissing the undead. Boom, boom, boom. Sorry, you guys aren't any, don't matter to me.
Awesome. And then,
Yeah.
of course, after that, the Il Juan came out.
Yeah, and we got stomped.
And everybody got stomped. Yeah, I mean, just absolutely, that was like, ah.
But it had, what was it? The entire group of Ilhan had like 60,000 hit points over all the tables.
Right.
And when they got to that number, the Ilhan dropped.
Yeah.
But it was really cool because we're trying to figure out how were we supposed to survive this? A lot of us weren't. No, characters made it. That's fine, but still, it was tension.
That was
There
a
was
meat grinder. It really, I mean, and that
Yeah.
was, I think that was part of, so, when you think about game design and how to create a truly entertaining experience, right? So there's been all this buildup, and your characters up to this point, I mean, you've been at risk. And like I said, stupidity leads to character creation. But this is the first time in the campaign, it just didn't matter. It didn't matter how smart you played. It didn't matter what you did. You were in a meat grinder.
Yep.
And then, through the story, they were able to help move all those fallen characters forward by introducing greater powers. But yeah, I mean, I'm sitting in a room with, I don't even know how many tables were in that hall, and people are just freaking out because their characters have just died.
Hmm. Yeah. Or dying or close. Yeah.
Or yeah, those are the types of experiences, that bring me back, that brought me back now into Arcanus, because outside of my original group of gaming buddies starting in 1980 until, we all left for college or the military, um, I never experienced that type of camaraderie, that type of buy-in. I think it's the buy-in that impresses me the most. So I, as a dungeon master, is that when I'm running the game, that's really what I want. I want buy-in. And so when I'm the player, that's what I'm giving. That's what I bring to the table, is I'm buying into the adventure. I'm here, I'm participating. I am going to understand myself. I'm going to make sure that there's a reason for me to be here.
Hmm.
There was so much of that in Arcanus. There were so few people who were the prima donnas that just refused to get along. Now, admittedly, it became important as the setting progressed that they had to set certain criteria, like Alori do not worship the human deities. Um, I don't know. Are Lori allowed to be mourners? I don't remember.
Well, and
Yes and no?
I don't remember. I figured the mourners would continue to use them, but
Yeah.
uh, some of that stuff didn't come up until later. But
Right.
also some of those secrets that came out in the game, because I just going back to you had different things show up where you're like, wait, Anshar is also Anshar, a deity of suffering and for some reason teleportation gates, is also Yig, a snake deity. Wait, what? Or that fire dragon, who was the deity that they
Hasagor.
uh, was Kasagor, the Yig's mate. And so, these things popping out all of a sudden, going, wait, how's that work? Um, there was a wonderful mod called Wrong Turn at Corion, where you get into one of their teleportation portals, and something goes wrong and it turns red, and you show up in an old Sethergorian outpost and learn that the teleportation portals were actually original Sethergorian, not, and so you learn truths, shall we say, or different things that were, oh, no, it's this way that they always tell you, but then the true secret comes out to the exploring players.
That I think that's one of the reasons I always try to play more skills based so that I can have that opportunity to explore the background, the knowledge, and that, in Arcanus, as you're running these games, as you're running the events, there's lots of background and lore available almost always.
Mhm.
It just requires inquisitive minds to do the investigating. And again, it's that investigating, right? When I played your module the other week, it was the investigating that helped us discover, lo and behold, hey, if we actually just have a simple conversation, maybe we can make this happen, even though given the circumstances we're looking at, we couldn't come up with a solution. Well, lo and behold, yeah, there's
Well, and you could have after that conversation, you went off and had some things set up
mhm,
you
mhm,
to make that scene easier. But there are
mhm,
people, entire tables, who didn't go have that conversation, so their scene was harder, but they could still do some
mhm,
of the same stuff.
right.
Uh, so
Well,
that
that's
was
what
that
I
was
try
fun.
to design so that there's a role play answer,
Mm.
there's a tactical answer, and there's a TPK. That's how I design my adventures.
Hmm. Yeah. No, there's always well, and sometimes that stress of the possibility of the TPK, of the possibility of losing, is what makes the win so much more fun. Um, there was a battle interactive, I want to say it's Sicarus, and this was a
Sikaris, yeah.
Gen Con, and the very last scene I still remember, where you're defending the last vestiges of people from the invading hordes,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and backup reinforcements is coming, and they start, so every few rounds of combat they will say something about them, the cloud coming, the thunderous noise, that sort of thing, and it felt so heroic. It was a blast. We had such a wonderful time, and it was our first battle interactive, and we're like, why did we miss the other ones? Because
Right.
it was so interesting and so fun and so well put together that way.
So are you going to be at Origins this year?
Yep, I just bought my tickets last weekend.
All right. All right. Well, I will be judging. I will be there for my first convention comeback and my first Arcanist judging. I'm really looking forward to it. I miss the community, and it's really impressive to me how, folks like you who I met 22 years ago, and again, you know, our contact is sporadic and tangential. Um, but the bonds that are created over these tables, what I'm hoping is that I'm going to be able to find the same opportunity to make the same connections doing online gaming, because obviously I'm going to have to make that transition. I've already done it once. It wasn't really,
I've
I don't know. I'm
uh,
a little too ADHD. I interrupt. I talk over people too much. It's really hard for me to get to that timing that when I'm running a game or when I'm around people, I've learned as an autistic person to be able to find that rhythm and work with it. Whereas this has been difficult, but I'm learning.
Well, and I switched over. I used to do online gaming when I moved at one point when I moved.
Hmm.
So in, I want to say 2018, I
Hmm.
was doing online gaming, but it was me and a group of people around a table someplace else. And that works differently than how I do online gaming now, which is me and everybody else on Zoom on their own account.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for ever since the pandemic started. And sometimes I use I've stopped running recently just because I kind of hit burnout.
Hmm.
And I'm more right now I'm playing, but I'm kind of tools neutral.
Okay.
So I I don't have a favorite tool or anything. I've actually done it. I did it a lot on just Zoom, where I would use annotate as a way to be able to do the show where different people were, that sort of thing, which actually made it very useful for me in for using Zoom at work. But I've played several different campaigns, both D&D, Pathfinder, and Arcanis. Right now, I'm in the middle of a bespoke online Arcanis game
Awesome. Awesome.
where we hired a GM to run a game for us, and we're going to try to make it all the way 1 through 20, and
Very
but
cool.
playing in the Arcanis world.
And are you're playing bespoke, so they're just running you their own thing that's not, you're not running the official
Nope.
storyline stuff. That's even better. I love when people are so inspired by a setting, they're able to go off and tell their own stories. Yeah, I'm struggling with the tool things too. Part of the weird dichotomy of me is that I was trained to operate, maintain, and repair the most advanced weapon system afloat, but I can't teach myself how to use Excel or any other app on my own. But if someone teaches me, I can figure it out. So I just backed a Kickstarter for RPG Stories VTT expansion, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna learn how to use this. I've talked with another creator gamer who we're gonna do since I don't know, I'm bad at this, and he's good at it, and together we're gonna figure out. Neither of us have used it before, and my goal is to create my Arcanus um, setting for when I do my own DMing.
Cool.
And I'm hoping because R20 or Roll20, have you used that much?
Yeah, I used it for a while. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's useful if you have time to set up the macros. I actually set up several Arcanis mods in it
Hmm.
and ran battle interactives in it.
So is
Uh,
it possible to like create a library like that? So you set all this stuff up and then put it somewhere so that then I can come in and use it.
Uh, there is a way to do that. I personally don't know, but I
All right.
know that you can set it up so that there's some way to transfer
Hmm. I'll
pieces
talk
of it
to,
between
you know,
people.
I have talked to a couple of the more ongoing, knowledgeable uh game masters, but I haven't gotten that far into discussing details yet.
Well,
Um,
and I'm sure if somebody had permission, they could put together the mods so
right.
that, hey, if you want to buy, espionage or the
Hmm.
drums or any of those, you could do that, and then it would have the maps and the bad guys and the macros all set up.
Okay. Sounds like we need to start recruiting some young tech whiz kids who do that stuff without a second thought. Whereas I look at it and go, man, I really love the idea of science fiction and technology, but I'm not as advanced as I thought I was.
Some of the tools are easier to use than others.
Mhm.
The silly thing is, you mentioned Excel. I learned more of how to use Excel by using character generators in 3.5 than trying to adapt it for Arcanis because they came out with Arcanis came out with its own feats and rules and those sort
Mhm.
of things for 3.5, and we're coming up with the cheesiest freaking characters we can. And yeah, I agree with you on the skills side. May I suggest investing in an artifice room?
Artifice room.
Room in 5e. It's in the.
Okay,
Mhm.
could my
It's in Forged
character.
in Magic. Sorry, I
Okay.
didn't mean to,
Oh yeah,
but
no, good for letting me know because I'm my character is a gnome cleric of Althares.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's my goal is to be a little ugly dude with a big boomstick.
That sounds hysterical. And how far back does the boomstick send him every time he fires it?
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, that's the deal, right? That's the things I'm learning about 5e is wow, conditions. Conditions, it's all about advantage, disadvantage, and conditions.
Yeah.
That's
Anything
it.
you can do for advantage is amazing. And for a while there, I had a familiar. I had a snake stick. Pretty much, it would transform into a python,
Mhm.
and I was sending the familiar out to give advantage to the snake to grapple the bad guys to have them restrained.
So real quick, and I don't want to take up the rest of your time, but so what you just described, so shaman, your character is a shaman.
Yes,
How is that different? Because these, one of the great things now about the fifth edition is that there are Arcanist character classes
there are
that
Arcanist
again
character
are
classes.
not that have that Arcanist twist. Um, so explain the shaman real quick.
So in Arcanus, now there are three different types of magic: arcane, divine, and primal, and you can't mix them. So primal is more for those people who are connected to the world. It's the primal energies. So in these, we'll say more native groups, they have uh, they follow some follow spirits, some follow animal spirits, things like that. And so a shaman it's a rewritten version of the warlock. So it uses a lot of the warlock mechanics,
Hmm.
but instead of buying powers, you are getting spirit boons, and there's a positive and a negative to every boon. For example, if you follow the spirit of the lion, on the positive side, you are immune to fear. On the negative side, you have to be the last one off the battlefield, which is fun in some of the battle interactives. And most of these hooks are role playing. The negatives uh, are role playing, and so for the shaman, you pick the major spirit you follow. You get to pick a subclass. So uh, there's one for Etsara, which is somebody who comes from the hinterlands, the more Mongol area. There's one that's a shifter where you're able to shape change like a normal 5e druid does. And then there's another one that's more about spirit control.
And you, like
But
you just real quick interruption. There are no druids. There are only shaman in
there are
Arcanist,
no
right?
druids, there are only shaman. Yeah, they've been revamped out. And so for the Sarishan that I play, he has to be the shifter because that's the only one that they can take, following Jiggle Sag, who is his particular deity. And then there's another version that came out in the Sethergoran book as well for that. And in that book, they renamed some of the spirits. So instead of lion, it's a more scaly creature.
Big lizard,
Yeah,
monitor
exactly.
lizard or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of that's one of the neat things about Arcanis. You can't, as you said, Alori couldn't worship human deities. There's a lot of things you can't do or have specific combinations. Uh, like the male Sarestan couldn't be a arcane spellcaster, but he can only be a primal spellcaster. Well, the female
Mhm.
Sarestan can't be the primal. lots of combinations like that.
Yep.
Uh,
For every restriction, there's some new combination and variation that you hadn't thought of. So it's a great opportunity to explore the world as compared to saying, oh, I can't play what I want to play.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I know you've talked to somebody who's been playing the same character for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on like my sixth character with Arcanis right now.
Mm-hmm.
Been having, you know, having a fun time. I did have a bit of alt-itis back in the 3.5 campaign. We had a few too many characters, but it
Mm.
was definitely fun to explore different aspects.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when there were all those different invisible kings out there, you could basically create a character for each region, you know. I mean, that's what I liked about the Invisible King, is it gave you an opportunity to not be invested in a single uh character class, but to really spread your wings, explore the opportunities, and you know, become a better role player. I mean, I'm a big believer you have to push yourself. If you're just sitting and you're comfortable and you're just doing the same thing, you know, I have a tendency to play world explorer rogues. That's what I play. That's just kind of who I am as a person in reality. So, you know, I discovered that it was more role. So for Arcanus, that worked great in the beginning, right? Because who knew what the world was? But
Right.
now that's not what I want to play. I want to play something that's actually an integration into the world that I now understand after all of this time of supporting the campaign and learning about it. All right. Well, look, man, I really appreciate this opportunity to reconnect. I'm looking forward to future opportunities to get together. Origins, well, I guess it's further away than I realize right now. But for me, it's like I leave the end of, I go on an annual fishing trip the first week of June, and this is the first time I'm ever going to go on that trip and then not come home, right? I'm going to go and then I'm going to wait a week and then I'm going to go to Columbus and I'm just going to kind of hang out in the Midwest somewhere, probably in Michigan. And, but
Well,
I'm really excited about, you know, this opportunity to reconnect. There are so many people who still come to Origins. You know, it's been a while since Arcanus had a strong presence, and I'm looking forward for the opportunity to hang out with you again.
hey, I just hope for your sake that you don't have to DM me, because all the
Oh,
cheese.
I'm not doing anything that high. I'm doing all intros. I mean, your 10th level character? No, no, no.
Hey, I hope you have a great time, and I hope the people are, that you run into are enthusiastic. I found the time I GM'd at Gen Con, there were a few Arcanis players I knew, but it was
Mhm,
mainly new people. And they actually got through, sometimes they would get through one of the 4-hour mods I had
mhm.
by making, we'll not say evil, but dark choices. They got
Yeah.
through, they made dark choices and got through without combat in an hour and a half to 2 hours. And they
And that
love
kind of
the
stuff
fact
hooks
that they
people.
could, that they could make, okay, you're not getting the super reward, but you're making, you're having a good time having the opportunity to make the choice rather than say be railroaded down a certain route.
Well, what I like to do is make the reward commensurate with the influence of the action.
Hmm.
So even, you know, and I brought this up numerous times, you know, there were many adventures where if you had combat, you'd lost and you didn't even realize it. That the whole goal of that adventure was now null and void because you drew a blade and drew blood.
Yep, I've seen
So
that several times,
yeah, that
and
that's
it's
that's what I like. I like that. Uh-oh, I need to really think. All right, man. I
all
appreciate
right.
it again. Take care.
You take care. Nice to see you.
All right, bye.